Hi. So far we have been talking about streaming processing, and streaming processing may not appear as something that is queryable in an ad hoc manner. So in an ad hoc manner whenever you want. But in fact, it turns out that it's possible, but it has some limitations, like for example, the scope of the query. Often you may only query the data available from your query beginning. So you cannot really query past data, as it's very often the case for ad hoc analysis on top of data at rest storage. And why this difference? So this difference comes from the perception of data. Data at rest can be perceived, understood as a table. So we have a table. When we do a select from it, we get all the data available at the time of the querying. Now, when we add new data, and again, we do the query, we get the data with two new rows. So the data is added, and whenever you query it, you don't have any temporal notion, the notion of time. It simply says that query all data which is there. It's different in data in motion. So again, we have our two first rows, and we do the select star all from table. We get our first two rows exactly as in this storage at rest. But now when two new records are coming, and again we issue this select query, we get only two new records that are available after this query. So that's the main difference. Data is moving, and your query adapts to this moving data, to this temporal character of the data. On the other hand, there's also some possibility to do some stateful querying, and in this stateful querying we can, for example, do some count. And here we execute the query for the first time. We store the count number here, and we return it to the downstream customers. And now when we run the query again after maybe a while, the storage, the ad hoc layer will remember this previous count, load it into memory, combine with this data, and update. So it's a special case for this querying mode, involving some much more complication, because you can see here that we need an extra component to deal with this incremental character, whereas in the data at rest it's very easier, because by definition all data you need to query is accessible for your SQL query. And why do we need to have this ad hoc querying on top of streaming layer, knowing that it's much more harder to do, and maybe not all operations are as easy to implement as for data at rest store? So first, bug analysis. So if you have your streaming job and you don't want to wait for the data to be checkpoint to be stored in your batch layer, you can simply run the queries to do some bug analysis. Another use case is for the data exploration. It's a bit similar reason for the bug analysis. You have some data you are discovering, and you want to maybe see the shape of the data. You don't have any data profiling tool yet, and the SQL queries on top of this direct data can be a good indicator to start writing your job, or at least to define the schema of your input data to process. Another one is to write SQL-based streaming jobs, so that you can invite analytical engineers to do some real-time processing, knowing that this SQL has always some limitations or some specific components like sources and sinks in streaming way, because the data, as you saw before, may need to be checkpointed for the stateful processing and things like that are not the same as in the data at rest SQL querying. And finally, something related to the SQL-based streaming jobs that you may write, real-time data analysis. So you can maybe create or apply some machine learning or prediction models on top of your real-time data with SQL, and get some better idea of what's going on with it. It's a little bit related to SQL-based streaming jobs, but I wanted just to highlight the fact of having data analysis on top of streaming data, something which is not very obvious because we think about data analysis in terms of data address storage. Naturally, it's for historical reasons, but it's possible to do also in streaming or directly in data in motion storage with some limitations as I mentioned previously. So that was a short lesson. I hope you will see how to apply all these concepts in practice in the demo part that I will present you very shortly, so in a few minutes. Thanks for watching and see you in the next lesson.